can spare myself the disclaimer after you've introduced me. So I would have pronounced here in the beginning that I don't have a computer science background, which people may expect when they hear the term database. So, but maybe we can discuss this a little later. So my perspective on research integrity is actually ethnographic. When I was talking to real people from different academic fields and wrote a dissertation about how scholars from different fields actually conceive of images, how they use images, and how they see their levels of liberty when manipulating images. That was something that interested me. So the title of my presentation here is now Image Manipulation Detection from Visual Inspection to Technology-Driven Procedures, ? With which I intended to aim at what I believe is the heart of this conference. So what I'm trying to do in the next 30 minutes or so, I'd like to share some reflections of what I think technology could offer to facilitate the process of image analysis and where I suspect challenges and limitations. Of course, we've heard from Elizabeth Bick's talk yesterday, and we are probably all aware of the fact that visual inspection plays a predominant role at this time in detecting inappropriate manipulations. And Jana Christopher and Jan Brocher are here as well, and they could tell us probably long stories about these aspects. But still, that's something that is stressed regularly. These processes are time consuming. Not everybody has the skill to detect manipulations, and it would be great actually to have some sort of tool or maybe a set of tools to speed up this process. In the second part of the presentation, I would like to refer to the project that you already mentioned, Daniel. In the literature, I found again and again that one thing that is missing, like a missing link, is the importance of a large enough database of real-world images for training purposes. So on Tuesday, I learned from Edward Delp that there is a way to artificially generate data for training purposes. And so one of my questions that I would like to find answers to is, do we actually need original image data, and what would be the advantage for people with a computational background? What we've done in Berlin, and I will talk about this later on, is we established a database for images from retracted articles with strong help from Elsevier. And I'll talk about this in the second part here. So my impression is that solving the problem of inappropriate image manipulation with the help of technology is not trivial. And there cannot be one solution at the push of a button for all the different forms of image manipulation that can occur. And there are a number of reasons, and I would like to discuss them with you. And maybe together we can then develop a sense of what is realistically possible and what some of the next steps could be. Consequently, the guiding question of this presentation is, how can technical solutions facilitate the detection of image manipulation? What is possible? Where are the boundaries? For an introduction, I'm going to ask why scientists manipulate images in the first place, then how to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate image manipulation, and what types of images or image manipulations are actually at the heart of forensic research. Afterwards, I show you some examples from different fields, from photojournalism to marine biology, and I will ask for each one of these cases to what extent technical tools could help to identify such manipulations and where limitations are. So now to my first question, and I start with the statement, I think that we are all kind of spoiled by images, spoiled from images on Instagram, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hollywood, and whatever Photoshop can do. So we have all become accustomed to brilliant images with a generosity of display, and that has an effect what we expect from images in general. So let me rephrase the question a little bit. There must be incentives for manipulating images, even in the scholarly field. And in this context, I don't mean fabrication or fraud, but types like cleaning up images, make them look better, or beautifying images. In my understanding, image manipulation in itself, although it's very often used in with a certain connotation, it is not reprehensible, but of course a legitimate means to an end within a certain framework. There is actually no image that is not manipulated because there are so many decisions made by, for example, the configurations of the capturing device, the camera sensor, shutter speed, lens type, and so on, which all have an effect on the outcoming image. On this slide here, actually, you can see a randomly chosen example, which is taken from an advertisement from Ample for a workshop on data visualization. So the text here emphasizes, I've highlighted that phrase, why not try to present your data in a visually appealing way and make sure all eyes are on your work, which makes the goal clear, it's attracting attention. We need to keep in mind data visualization is not equivalent to image manipulation, but maybe there are some similarities. Later in the same ad, the author emphasizes, and I quote, "Drama, darling, when you start talking about creating illustrations for more broad communication, other factors come into play. Use dramatic elements, make it eye-catching, appeal to human emotion, make it relatable and appealing, or possibly even controversial. It needs to stir emotions," end of quote. Don't get me wrong, of course, advertisements like that are legitimate, but in a way they highlight a dilemma in my eyes. Because when we are so focused on attention and on having beautiful images, there is maybe the risk of crossing a line of putting aesthetics over data. Another complicating factor is that scientists associate the use of images in image manipulation with not just one purpose, but many. So let me make another point here. Image manipulation, you probably will agree, is a complex issue for a number of reasons. And here I'm not even referring to the technical aspects and technical challenge with which media forensics have to deal, but images themselves are complex artifacts and they have many dimensions. And although visual inspection can reveal things that are visible, of course, a decision whether there has been a breach of integrity is sometimes not made at first glance, because not all manipulations are visible, simply. Besides, and we had this discussion on Tuesday, different disciplines have different standards and guidelines for image manipulation, image preparation. So the context in which an image is used somehow determines whether manipulation can be considered appropriate or not. You just have to think of these beautiful false colored NASA images or of cover art in general. So what is to be considered appropriate or not and acceptable or not is something that we need to keep in mind when we talk about developing automated solutions for image analysis. But now, how to tell between what is doable but not necessarily appropriate and what is appropriate and acceptable? Emma Frau, in her 2012 article, Drawing a Line, has shown how many editors are devoted to a concept of mechanical objectivity, was the term, I think, which means data has to reflect reality unaltered. And objectivity equals, I'll quote, resisting the temptations of aesthetics. However, what is to be considered appropriate or not is subject to a process of constant renegotiation, and maybe the evolution of technology also gradually changes our perception of what we consider appropriate. Roughly speaking, and I refer to idea Mike Rosner spread in the early 2000s, roughly speaking, with regard to the biomedical field, image manipulations that improve the visibility of the information in the image are accepted, such as contrast or brightness changes over the entire image. But other manipulations that hide or add information and thereby affect the interpretation of the image are considered inappropriate. So measures that aim at beautifying images, cleaning up images are generally considered problematic, at least. But here, and we'll talk about this later when I show some examples, here I think we enter some gray area. The point I want to make is, in some way, it's an oversimplification to just distinguish between error and sloppiness and intentional fabrication or fraud. Very often when it comes to image manipulation, we speak about duplication because they I think count for about half of the known cases. But there are, of course, many other things that one can do to an image. And on this slide, you see an overview of some types of image manipulation, which is certainly not comprehensive. But it's meant to underline the complexity of the phenomenon, especially when we talk about technology-driven solutions. And what makes it even more problematic is that many of these manipulations occur in combination, and when they occur in combination, it may make the work of algorithms even more complicated. It could be an additional challenge here. So images are smoothed, brightness and contrast are changed, they're rotated, zoomed, cropped, and so on. And these combinations of manipulation, they may pose their own unique challenge for developers. And maybe we can discuss this later. From Edward's talk, I got the impression that there are ways actually around these problematic things, and that there are algorithms that are robust enough to deal with such issues. So the question that I had after his talk was actually, will such tools be available and when? And we don't have to talk about processing time, but maybe we can discuss this later. The image type in the context of use plays a role. Of course, whether an image has plagiarized or whether the metadata or the EXIF data has been changed, there are all kinds of different manipulations that can affect the information, just like as if the pixels of the image are changed. So we don't even talk about anti-forensics. So if blur filters are applied, this might pose an additional challenge here. So now I try to skip over, oh, there's something in my presentation. That's not what I wanted. Okay. So yesterday we heard a lot about media forensics from Matt Turek. So this will be certainly a little bit of repetition, but image forensics distinguish between blind and non-blind procedures depending on whether there's access to the original image or not, or between active and passive procedures. So active procedures like watermarking or hash encryption can certainly play a role in the forensic process. They insert a pattern invisible to the eye, and the question is, well, I don't know, whether such patterns could actually cause disruptions in artificial intelligence systems. In practice, the detection of image manipulation in scholarly journals is mostly done blindly, meaning without access to the original image, which poses a challenge in itself. Mostly images are published in PDFs in weaker resolution, and if there is doubt, the original image files need to be provided upon request. No need to mention that there are many cases, and I found cases on the Retraction Watch blog, where the data, when editors came and asked for the original data, where the data was lost, and it was claimed it was lost in an earthquake or fire or a flood or stuff like that. One real-world example for the introduction of a non-blind procedure is the World Press Photo Award competition, where the organizers, after the scandal in 2015, when it was found that about 20% of all the images in the penultimate round were manipulated, the organizers actually evaluated the workflows and established a requirement to submit the original photos together with the competition photos. These non-blind procedures make it, of course, easier to analyze and compare and to see what has been done to a photo. But still, at the World Press Photo Award competition, this work is done manually. So they work with overlays and just to visually inspect how much has been done to the photo. That's, of course, true for the scientific field too. Elizabeth Big yesterday explained to us uh, how she actually manually analyzed 20,000 articles for image duplicates. And it is a good example of how effectively the human eye can be trained. And it can make a big difference. At the same time, and I think we had the discussion before too, there is evidence that like the research of Nightingale and Schettinger have shown that the untrained human eye is not very good in detecting manipulations. And this is actually where technically assisted workflows could be beneficial. But still, we need to deal with the question, what is realistic here? This next chart provides an overview by Ansari et al., giving an impression of how many possible starting points there are for forensic analysis on the pixel level alone. The manipulations are not only, of course, analyzed on the pixel level, but the forensic interest is directed at the entire image lifecycle, from the producing device to the storage processes in the camera, the sensor artifacts, the so-called sensor fingerprint, and other traces left by software products. And of course, the integrity of what is depicted, the semantic analysis, plays a crucial role. Light directions and scale can be evaluated. The realism of the environment shown, depending on the photo, can be analyzed, and can be screened for anomalies. There are many, that's the point here, there are many, many different starting points. Forensic research has actually been devoted to a wide variety of problems, more than I can actually oversee. But if you just focus on the pixel level, I think something is missing in my presentation again. Trying to fill this in here so that you see the entire chart. Up, too far, go back. All right. So on the pixel level, forensic research, most of the forensic research that I've found is focused on certain types of manipulation. For example, copy move, which refers to the copying and moving of image content within an image. Cut and paste, which means copying image content from one image and then pasting it onto another image. Of course, plagiarism, we discussed this in some detail, and the overwriting of image areas with background texture, so-called erase fill. But there are, of course, many, many more categories. So now have a look at some concrete examples. And we may focus on the question, what could a technical tool, an algorithm, a software tool actually deliver here to detect a manipulation, and where are limitations and challenges? So this next example, I'm trying to start this movie here, I hope you can see that one, is from the photographer Steve McCurry. Some of you are certainly familiar with the person, and it shows how Steve McCurry, with his post-processing, actually violated some, maybe all of the community standards of the photographic community. In this case, McCurry has replaced, erased, reworked the image. He's changed basically the entire look and feel of the image, and in comparison to the original image. This level of post-processing is, of course, problematic, but his artistic and aesthetic claims here are in clear contrast to the documentary purpose. When he was actually faced with allegations that he violated community standards, he replied he saw himself more as a visual storyteller and artist, for which he obviously thought he could claim different levels of liberty. Such manipulations are, and that needs to be emphasized here, rarely obvious from just looking at the photographs. And this case only surfaced because McCurry had both the original photo and the post-processed version online on his website. And when the criticism was came up, then he actually decided to take these photos down. So it's an interesting question whether some software tool would have detected this manipulation precisely because this image is so extremely reworked. Another case I actually retrieved from Elizabeth Bick's Twitter stream. Thank you very much. It has a similar aesthetic claim with the series. It's called Diamond Nights, and the photographer actually documented some of the oldest trees on Earth. And I found this on Elizabeth's Twitter stream, and she had this little game where she highlighted some of the cloned image regions and other conspicuous features, and there was a debate going on. So I followed a little bit, and I played around with it a little bit. So I have another version where I highlighted some of the things that I found. And you see here these peculiarities. They are copied, rotated, and mirrored image areas. And when she was asked what happened, Beth Moon actually said that that there was a mistake made by an assistant in the studio. So she was not responsible. And such photos actually consist of many individual photos that are then stitched together in the studio. And that's what she said to the media, that her assistant got the things mixed up here. And she was simply not present in the studio, had no time to supervise studio work. I think in this case, an algorithm with the power of detecting similar image regions could have been useful. And I'm sure that Daniel can say some words about this afterwards. Another case I would like to present is from marine biology. Both of these pictures show the same section of the ovaries of a pea crab, which are small animals living in symbiosis with clams. The biologists who took this photo under the microscope found that a damaged glass knife actually left a long scratch. You see this on the left side in the left photo where I added these arrows. I'm not sure whether you can see this on your screen, but it actually disturbed, this scratch actually disturbed the otherwise very good image. So then she decided to actually remove, or she had the scratch removed in Photoshop with the help of a colleague who was actually skilled enough to make use of Photoshop in that way. So the right photo with the letters you see, it's the photos as published. It in a way poses an interesting question. Of course, the removal of eyelashes or dust or scratches like this are prohibited by guidelines. On the other hand, when there are artifacts removed from an image by cropping, there would be no problem. And another interesting question would be, what would have happened if some software tool had found this sort of manipulation? How would an editor had responded to that case? Would a correction have been demanded, or would they have recommended to use the original image with the scratch? So the point I want to make is a software tool alone cannot make complex decisions like that. But it could have indicated that there's something happened to this photo, and the editor should look more closely, or the reviewer should look more closely. This next example would certainly never have been questioned without a whistleblower playing an active role. This is the award-winning photo of the World Wildlife Photographer of the Year Award 2017 by Marcio Cabral in the Animals in the Environment category. And it was disqualified because of the accusation that the photographer had used the stuffed animal to stage this photo. So a panel of experts found that the anteater in the photo was too similar to a stuffed anteater located at the entrance of the natural reserve where the photo was taken. On this next slide, you can see both animals. And well, there's a level of similarity. And it's interesting in this case that, that the integrity of the digital photo could not be doubted by any software because the photo was not manipulated. And there were no side shots available because it was a 30-second long-term exposure. And as Cabral told the story, when the flash is fired out there in the dark, the animal was startled and left the scene. So we need to keep in mind, just to be fair, that until this day, Marcio Cabral claims his innocence. He claims this was not the same animal as located at the entrance of the park, but still the prize was revoked from him and he was banned from ever participating in the competition again. So now to the image integrity database. At the HEADT Center, we've started building this database since 2017 to collect images from retractions and make them available to interested researchers and research groups with the initial goal of facilitating tool development. And I'll say some words about the database soon, but first we have a look at two examples that come from the database. This one is an example of image plagiarism, and it shows that software, detection software, would not only have to be able to recognize rotated, zoomed, and colored images, but there would also have to be a reference database with all published images, basically, to use them for matching purposes to detect this case of plagiarism. So as soon as we talk about cut and paste or copying and reusing images across articles, similarity searches are no sufficient answer. This would be somewhat different in this last case here, where you see I marked some of the images with yellow arrows for you to make it easier to see which ones are duplicates. So what requires some practice for the human eye to detect this could surely be recognized with the help of software quickly and reliably under the precondition that the images are not altered in any other way, like zoomed, rotated, stretched, or blurred. And I think that Daniel in his work showed that, that there are tools that successfully can detect such cases here. It is interesting what would happen if anti-forensic measures were applied. But back to the database for a second. So it was our initial plan in Berlin to set up a repository for retracted images from publications. And we started with a focus on the field of biology and medicine. And as I mentioned above, so the idea was to build up a large enough database so that people could use it for algorithm development. And we were fully aware that we're not talking about hundreds, but about many thousands of images needed, because these are computational neural networks and stuff like that. They are data hungry. So, but we found this gap in the literature, and I quote Zhang et al., who say, okay, there are so many data sets, they have been released since 2004, but the number of template images is still less than 15,000 in each one of these data sets. And even worse, there are forms of manipulations where no data sets are available at all. For example, erase fill. Another thing that I found in the literature was that especially the need for real world data instead of artificially created test images appear to be relevant. And since we had support from Elsevier, we thought, okay, let's start with Elsevier and then move on, invite other publishers, create some sort of multi-publisher initiative, starting with the big ones like Wiley, Springer, and then creating an environment that allows researchers around the globe to train their models. So that was the vision where we started. For each one of these cases that being included in the database, we created an individual data set with all the downloadable files, references to the case, to the retraction statements, specifications about the nature of the manipulation, links to retraction watch entries or pub peer discussions and so forth. Because many of these cases are very complex, and Elizabeth showed yesterday how long it sometimes takes until the retraction actually happens. So because cases are so complex, we thought that it makes sense to build up a data set which is detailed enough to actually reconstruct what happened. I need to emphasize here that the database as it is at this moment is still way too small for algorithm training. And it is smaller, way smaller than in these artificially created data sets that are used in forensic research. And one of the reasons for that fact is that once you start dealing with real world data, you run in all kinds of legal issues. That was a little bit easier for us because Elsevier was on our side and backing us up and made our life easier here. And we added images from open source publishers like Ndavi, Applause, and Frontiers. And still, we would need much, much more data from other publishers. That is the assumption. So at this moment, there are ongoing talks with supporters of the database and with user groups. So it was our idea that we need not only the data from publishers, but we need to develop this resource further in close cooperation with people who actually want to touch the data and want to work with the data. So we started a collaboration with Harvard Medical School, and we are in discussions with Syracuse University, and hopefully soon we'll have some sort of legal agreement so that we can actually open the data up and start working there. So to summarize what I said, what speaks for technological driven solutions and what are the challenges and limitations? Of course, if we had some sort of powerful tool and let it be only for one sort of manipulation, let's say duplications, that would be a game changer. Automated screening of all published images for standard manipulations such as copy move, erase fill could actually help editors, of course, and it could indicate where they should be looking more closely. It would come with the potential of actually restore trust in scientific results and help to save a lot of time. I mentioned this before. And it could maybe help to clean up the scholarly record, depending on how journals and publishers respond to cases that are reported. At the same time, if there were powerful tools and people were aware of that, it could actually motivate scientists to act more carefully, be cautious, and it could discourage people from plagiarizing and just stealing content, manipulating images. On the other hand, I think that if there was some powerful tool available, it could at the same time produce a false sense of security when reviewers rely just on technology, and when the technology says, okay, there is nothing wrong with the image is not flagged, and I could think that people just rely and think it's okay. So the image is verified, but there's no way to verify the image actually. In the end, final decisions about cases of research integrity and image manipulation can't be made by machines alone, and developing tools requires an interdisciplinary approach, which is certainly another challenge on the way to developing a technical solution for detection. So that was basically what I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your comments and questions.